people seem to think that capitalism was this kind of nice free market decentralized system of lots of small businesses competing with one another, and that those kind of market interactions were entirely separate from what went on within the state. And a real capitalist society is one with a free market and a small state. And if you look at all actually existing capitalist societies, they have highly concentrated unfree markets and very big powerful states that are willing to step in to support the interests of big business. So that's basically what the book is about. It's about how capitalism is not a free market system, how there is a fusion of economic and political power in service of vested interests at the top of society. It's a Marxist interpretation, so it looks at how the power relations within capitalist societies work at the level of the corporation, where you have this divide between owners and workers, at the level of the state, where basically you see politicians consistently intervening to prop up the interests of those capitalists, and how that looks at the international level as well. So when it comes to imperialism. And then at the end, I kind of chart the way out of this and show that if capitalism is this system of basically kind of like centralized oligarchy of businesses, politicians, financial institutions, all working together to consolidate their wealth and privilege, then socialism doesn't mean like a big powerful state because the politicians are in bed with the bankers and the bosses. It instead means the kind of redistribution and decentralization of power. So like pulling power back down from those elites to ordinary people. And so I look at how that is happening right now.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the book again this morning and feeling into it. I mean, obviously we have a very, very extreme circumstance going on in the US. And I think the desired outcome I share with you would be redistribution of power, to some extent, redistribution of financial resources, maybe to a great extent. And I appreciated that you were being tactical and trying to sort of like look at examples of where that's occurred and how that could occur. Of course, I mean, it's hard not to be a little pessimistic at the moment, in terms of what's happening around the world. It just feels that these kind of transnational, mafioso oligarchy has really, hit its stride, and they've all kind of like found each other, and they've kind of like determined, kind of what the model is for the future. And also, they very much think that with artificial intelligence and drones and robots, it's soon going to be an offer that we can't possibly refuse. We just don't have the ability to refuse it. So I'm very curious because I think we're in this actually very like crucial few year period where maybe there's still a way out from this thing. So I'm very curious just to maybe go into that like with you, like where we're at now, and from a leftist perspective, kind of like a perspective that wants human freedom and socialism and true democracy and so on. What can we actually do at this point? And I know England and America are slightly different situations, although have a lot of similarities and resonances. So yeah, that's like my big question or my big thought around the situation. So I've been doing a lot of researching into the sort of tech oligarchs and how kind of like because a lot of these guys were like Obama Democrats, and they suddenly for a whole host of reasons got pulled to the right and ended up. I mean, Peter Thiel was obviously like the bellwether, and then all of them have now joined forces, with this sort of fascist, unfortunately, kind of regime. So anyway, yeah, I don't know if you want to reflect on any of that, or I can.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to what you were saying about how this is like it's hard to feel hopeful during this moment. I think depending on your understanding of how capitalism works, it's easy to overestimate the novelty of what we're seeing right now. And actually, I wrote Vulture Capitalism. It came out last year before this stuff had happened. And the whole argument of the book is that the nature of capitalism is that corporate, financial, and political elites work together to secure their own wealth and privilege, that oligarchy and capitalism basically go hand in hand. And you can track that all the way back to the very origins of the system with the East India Company, this like joint venture between the British state and a bunch of merchants with the aim of colonizing the Indian subcontinent, all the way through to, I look at I track the evolution of the Ford Motor Company, which is supposed to be this kind of brilliant capitalist enterprise. And Ford is this kind of, free marketeer. And I show the deep interrelationships between Ford and the American state. And how the American state really supported Ford in basically waging war against his workers to consolidate his own power. I also think there's a very interesting parallel there because Ford was a fascist. He was a vehement anti-Semite. He was mentioned positively by Hitler in Mein Kampf as like a good guy. And a lot of that came from not only his kind of weird interpretation of Christianity, but also his like absolute hatred of unions and the idea that if anyone stood up to his power and his authority, that was the worst possible thing they could do because it would mean disorder and chaos. And you see echoes of that kind of thinking, I think, today across the alt-right, but particularly in Elon Musk, who's obviously also makes cars, also has very close links with the American state, also quasi kind of fascist who hates unions and has gone to war with his labor movement. So again, very clear historical parallels there. And I also think, another interesting example is who did Donald Trump make Secretary of State in his first term? Rex Tillerson, this former CEO of ExxonMobil, a company that knew about climate breakdown in the 1970s and so took funding out of its climate research team and redirected it into climate denialism. Like all of this stuff has been happening for a very long time. It's just become much more obvious and much clearer, partly because the people whose interests are now being disrupted are people whose interests haven't up to now been as disrupted by these patterns. So if we're thinking about the kind of technological shifts, then it's mainly kind of middle income office workers who are seeing these shifts affect them right now. When we're thinking about Trump's trade war, then, it's everyone really in the economy who's being affected by that, but it is having a significant impact on, for example, people's pension wealth and their stock portfolios. And it's obviously kind of taking aim at the free trade, and I use that term loosely, consensus that's dominated the mainstream media and, liberal. And I use liberal in the British sense, by the way, which just means kind of like moderate thought across the Republicans and the Democrats for a very long time. So people are now suddenly being like, oh, wow, this horrible oligarchy is happening and it's coming to take my stuff. But actually, if you look at capitalism in a clear-eyed way, you can see that this is always how this system has worked. It's just becoming obvious because we're in this moment of really profound crisis for a lot of different reasons, whether you're looking at that in economic terms, in terms of growth and productivity, whether you're looking at it in terms of climate and ecology, whether you're looking at it in terms of kind of the trust and faith in democracy and that being eroded by rising inequality. All these crises kind of coming together to expose the weaknesses and limitations of the system that is supposed to govern our interactions with each other, whether those interactions are economic, political, or social, or whatever. People are basically suddenly starting to realize that capitalism is corrupt and doesn't have the interests of the majority at, our leaders don't have the interests of the majority at heart. And that if we don't do something about it, the system will bring us down, our societies down, our planet down, and all of the things we value down with it. I think it's important not to overestimate the novelty of this moment, to recognize that these trends are kind of integral to the way that this system works, and to take faith and hope from people throughout history who have also experienced this kind of corruption, this kind of oligarchy, and worked together to fight back against it. Because those people, let's say, the earliest unionists who were working to build power in the context of not having the vote, in the context of a brutal industrial system that was resulting in them dying at very early ages, without much education, without really a kind of historical tradition of unionism to draw on, they had to do it, and they did. And that's why we have in the UK socialized healthcare. It's why you got the New Deal and why we got limitations on working time. People have been fighting this system since its origins. The history of capitalism, the history of the world is the history of class struggle. This has always been the case. I just think that now we're hearing a lot more about it because it has become quite clear that the way that we organize our society right now benefits almost nobody, except those at the very, very top.